She buried her father. 3 hours later, her husband walked into the funeral reception holding his mistress's hand. Guests laughed. His family humiliated her. Phones came out. Everyone thought she was weak. What they didn't know, she had just inherited a $15 billion empire. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about silence before the storm, and the moment power changes hands forever. The afternoon sun hung low over Buckhead, pouring through the towering glass walls of the Westfield estate like an uninvited witness. Light spilled across imported Italian marble floors, glinting off crystal chandeliers that had once hosted charity galas, political fundraisers, and celebrations of impossible success. Today, the mansion felt cold, hollow, stripped of meaning. 3 hours earlier, Naomi Westfield had buried her father. 3 hours earlier, she had watched the casket descend into Georgia soil, carrying with it the only person who had ever loved her, without conditions, calculations, or expectations. And now she stood alone near the far windows of the Grand Hall, dressed in a simple black dress that hung loosely on her slender frame. No diamonds, no pearls, nothing that hinted she was the daughter of one of America's most powerful hotel magnates. The only jewelry she wore was a thin gold chain around her neck, disappearing beneath the fabric. Her hands trembled slightly as she held a glass of water she hadn't taken a single sip from. The reception was supposed to be quiet, private, a dignified farewell for Ethan Westfield, the man who had risen from motel janitor to billionaire CEO of Westfield International Hospitality, a global empire spanning luxury resorts, private islands, and elite urban hotels. Instead, it had become a stage where grief was inconvenient and cruelty was entertainment. The guests moved in clusters, murmuring behind polite smiles. Some wore genuine sympathy on their faces. Others wore thinly veiled impatience. Many were already calculating what Ethan's death would mean for them: contracts, promotions, access. Phones buzzed discreetly in hands. Whispers carried through the hall like smoke. Naomi felt detached from it all, as if she were watching the scene through thick glass. Her eyes were red, swollen, unfocused. Her chest ached with a dull, constant pressure that made it hard to breathe. Then the doors opened. Not quietly, not respectfully. The heavy double doors at the front of the hall swung wide and conversation faltered as heads turned. Marcus Reed walked in like he owned the place. Tall, confident, immaculately dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that Naomi herself had once picked out for him. His posture was relaxed, his expression easy, too easy for a man attending his father-in-law's funeral. And he was not alone. His arm was wrapped tightly around Sienna Brooks. She was young, mid-20s at most. Long dark hair cascading over bare shoulders, lips painted a deep, unapologetic red. Her dress was crimson tight, sleeveless, cut low in a way that left nothing to the imagination. It screamed defiance. It screamed disrespect. It screamed, "I don't care who you buried today." Sienna worked in public relations for one of the Westfield resorts. Naomi had approved her hire herself 2 years earlier, impressed by her resume, her polish, her ambition. A mistake that now stood on Marcus's arm, smiling. Gasps rippled through the hall. Then the phones came out. One by one, guests raised their devices, recording openly now. No shame, no hesitation. This wasn't mourning. This was content. Viral, explosive, irresistible content. Marcus scanned the room, his eyes gliding past Naomi as if she were a stranger, as if she were furniture. Then he leaned down and kissed Sienna on the cheek, slowly, deliberately. Right there, in front of everyone, right in front of his wife. Naomi felt her body lock up. Her mind screamed for her to move, to speak, to do something, but grief had wrapped its hands around her throat and squeezed. All she could do was stand there, frozen, as her marriage collapsed in the same room meant to honor her father's memory. Laughter broke out, not joyful laughter, cruel laughter. Diana Reed, Marcus's mother, approached with a champagne flute already in hand. She wore black, but the fabric was designer, the cut elegant, the look more socialite than mourner. Her lips curved into a smile sharp enough to draw blood. She looked Naomi up and down and spoke loudly, intentionally. "Honestly, Naomi, do you ever stop looking miserable? Diana said. Even today, you could at least try to hold yourself together. It's just a reception. More laughter. Diana took a sip of champagne, savoring the moment. Nearby, Logan Reed, Marcus's younger brother, snorted. That's just how she is, he said, not bothering to lower his voice. Always the victim, always making everything about her feelings. He adjusted his expensive watch, one Naomi recognized. A gift from her father. Exactly, Diana added. Ethan just passed, and somehow she still manages to kill the mood. The words landed like blows. Naomi's chest tightened. Her fingers clenched around the glass until she feared it might shatter in her hand. She turned slowly, her eyes searching the room until they found Marcus. She didn't beg. She didn't plead. She just looked at him. A silent request. A last hope. Please, say something. Defend me. Remember the vows you made. Marcus met her gaze for half a second. Then he shrugged. Sienna leaned into him, whispering something into his ear. Whatever it was made him grin. He pulled her closer and kissed her again, this time not on the cheek. This time it was deep, lingering, intimate. A kiss meant to humiliate. A kiss meant to erase. Naomi took a step forward without realizing it. Marcus raised his hand, palm out, the same way someone might stop a waitress. Not today, Naomi, he said coolly. Let people enjoy themselves. Your father wouldn't want everyone walking around depressed. Diana lifted her glass in agreement. Exactly. Ethan's gone. God rest his soul, but we still have to deal with you. Try to be pleasant for once. More laughter. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. A few looked away, embarrassed. Most kept recording, eyes gleaming with anticipation, waiting for Naomi to finally crack. She didn't. Not yet. Instead, she turned and walked toward the balcony doors. Behind her, she heard Sienna say something sharp and mocking. The room erupted again. Naomi didn't catch the words. She didn't need to. The laughter told her everything. As she reached the doors, she noticed someone standing near the wall. Mr. Jonathan Caldwell, her father's longtime attorney. Tall, silver-haired, composed. He held a black leather folder against his chest, his expression unreadable. Their eyes met. Caldwell glanced at his watch. Then he gave her the smallest nod. Wait. Naomi touched the chain beneath her dress and stepped outside. The balcony overlooked acres of manicured gardens, fountains, stone pathways, perfect hedges. This estate had been her father's pride. Every inch of it had been built from money earned through exhaustion, sacrifice, and relentless discipline. Inside, the party continued. Marcus laughed. Diana held court. Logan posed for selfies. No one remembered why they were there. No one except Naomi. A soft voice spoke behind her. Mrs. Westfield, are you all right? Naomi turned to see Mrs. Helen Carter, the head housekeeper. She had worked for Ethan Westfield for over 20 years. Her warm brown eyes were filled with concern as she set down a tray with a fresh glass of water. I'm fine, Naomi whispered. Her voice cracked on the word fine. Mrs. Carter placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. Your father was a good man, she said quietly. The best I ever worked for. And he loved you more than anything. Tears welled up again. He's waiting for you, Mrs. Carter added. Naomi frowned slightly. Waiting for me? Mr. Caldwell, Mrs. Carter explained. He asked to speak with you privately. Your father left very specific instructions. Naomi glanced back through the glass doors. Marcus was feeding Sienna cake. Diana was laughing. Logan was still recording. Okay, Naomi said at last. Tell him I'll meet him in my father's study. Mrs. Carter nodded and disappeared inside. Naomi remained on the balcony for a moment longer, letting the cool breeze brush her face, drying the tears. Her fingers curled around the chain at her neck. She didn't know it yet, but the woman everyone had just humiliated. It was about to become the most powerful person in the room. And this funeral was only the beginning. The study felt untouched by time. As Naomi Westfield stepped inside, the noise from the reception vanished the moment the heavy wooden door closed behind her. The air carried the familiar scent of leather, old books, and faint traces of her father's cologne. Something warm and grounding that made her chest tighten all over again. This room had always been Ethan Westfield's sanctuary. Dark walnut shelves lined the walls, filled with business books, framed photos, and carefully organized binders. The massive desk sat exactly as he had left it, papers stacked neatly, pen aligned with obsessive precision. Behind it hung a black and white photograph of Ethan in his early 20s, standing in front of a rundown roadside motel, sleeves rolled up, eyes determined. The beginning of everything. Naomi stood there silently, absorbing the space, feeling like an intruder in a place that no longer belonged to anyone living. The door opened quietly behind her. Jonathan Caldwell entered and shut it gently, as if sealing them inside a different world. He did not rush. He did not speak immediately. He simply watched Naomi for a moment, taking in her pale face, her rigid posture, the grief barely contained beneath her composure. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said at last. "Your father was an extraordinary man." Naomi nodded. Words felt heavy, useless. "He was everything," she replied softly. Caldwell gestured toward one of the leather chairs across from the desk. "Please sit." She did, folding her hands in her lap, forcing herself to breathe evenly. Caldwell remained standing. He placed the black leather folder on the desk but did not open it yet. Instead, he leaned back slightly, studying her as if measuring how much truth she could withstand. "Your father was very specific about when this conversation was meant to happen," he said. Naomi lifted her gaze. "You mean now?" "Yes." He checked his watch. "Exactly now." A flicker of unease passed through her. "Why?" "Because," Caldwell said calmly, "he wanted to see how people would behave when they believed you were powerless." Naomi's breath caught. "I don't understand." "He knew," Caldwell continued, his voice steady and precise, "that after his death, certain individuals would reveal their true nature. He believed grief strips people of pretense. It exposes who they really are." Naomi's mind flashed back to Marcus's smile, Diana's laughter, Sienna's red dress. Her hands tightened. "You're saying he expected this?" Caldwell opened the folder. Inside were documents, photos, printed emails, bank statements. "He anticipated every part of it," Caldwell said quietly, "including Marcus." Naomi felt something inside her shift. Not relief, not comfort, but a sharp, burning awareness. "My father knew about the affair," she said. "Yes," Caldwell replied without hesitation. "He discovered it over a year ago." The words hit harder than she expected. "A year?" Her voice trembled despite her effort to stay composed. "He knew for a year and didn't tell me?" "He wanted to," Caldwell said. "Many times. But your father understood something most people don't. He knew that if he confronted Marcus directly, or told you too soon, Marcus would manipulate the situation. Apologize. Promise change. Buy time." Naomi swallowed. "So instead," Caldwell continued, "your father watched. He observed. He documented." He slid several photographs across the desk. Naomi's stomach dropped. Marcus and Sienna in hotel lobbies, in elevators, in private suites, Westfield suites, dates and locations printed clearly at the bottom of each image. "He used his own properties," Caldwell said, a hint of disgust creeping into his tone. "Your father considered that the ultimate insult." Naomi looked away, blinking rapidly. "There's more," Caldwell added. Emails followed, messages filled with false affection, crude jokes, careful planning. Marcus discussing Naomi like an obstacle, like a temporary inconvenience. Then came the financial records. Caldwell laid them out slowly, methodically. "Over the last 2 years," he explained, "Marcus diverted company funds through inflated expense reports and shell accounts. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. The total exceeds $3 million. Naomi stared at the numbers, numb. "He paid for her lifestyle with my father's money," she whispered. "Yes." "And his family?" Naomi asked. Caldwell exhaled. "Your father was aware of their intentions as well. Diana, Logan, both assumed Marcus would inherit control of the company through marriage. They began positioning themselves long before Ethan's diagnosis." Naomi laughed once, bitter and hollow. "So while I was taking care of my dying father, they were planning how to take everything." "Yes." Silence settled heavily between them. Naomi leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling, fighting the familiar urge to collapse inward. For years, she had blamed herself, her grief, her seriousness, her inability to be easy, like Sienna. Now the truth burned through that illusion. "I wasn't crazy," she said quietly. "No," Caldwell replied. "You were surrounded by people who benefited from convincing you that you were." Naomi closed her eyes. Memories surfaced, unbidden, relentless. Her childhood in a cramped apartment in rural Alabama. Her father leaving before sunrise in a janitor's uniform. Returning late with blistered hands and exhaustion etched into his face. The nights he skipped meals so she could eat. The weekends spent cleaning motel rooms together when he finally bought his first property. She remembered asking him once why he never rested. Because one day, he had said, kneeling in front of her, "You won't have to beg anyone for respect." Her chest tightened. "He always knew," she murmured. "Didn't he?" Caldwell nodded. "Your father was many things, Naomi, but he was never naive." Naomi opened her eyes and looked directly at him. "What did he do?" Caldwell's expression hardened slightly. 6 months ago, Ethan restructured the entire ownership framework of Westfield International Hospitality. Naomi's heart skipped. He transferred voting control, adjusted trust structures, reinforced the prenuptial agreement, and placed contingency clauses on executive employment contracts. She sat up straighter. Meaning, Caldwell said carefully, that nothing Marcus or his family planned will work. Naomi stared at him, hope beginning to rise, dangerous, fragile. "The will," she said. "When is it read?" Caldwell checked his watch again. "By your father's instructions, in exactly 15 minutes. Her breath caught. "In front of everyone?" "Yes." Naomi stood slowly. "My father wanted this to be public," Caldwell continued. "He wanted witnesses, cameras, accountability. He wanted people to feel what it's like to be exposed." Naomi walked toward the desk, resting her hands on its edge. "He knew this would hurt," she said, "that it would destroy people." Caldwell met her gaze. He knew, but he also knew they had already chosen their path. Naomi nodded, her grief beginning to transform into something sharper, stronger. "What happens next?" she asked. Caldwell closed the folder and held it firmly. "Next, Naomi, your father tells the truth. And after that, everything changes." A knock sounded at the door. Time was up. Naomi took a deep breath, straightened her dress, and lifted her chin. For the first time since her father's death, she didn't feel small. She felt ready. And somewhere beyond the study walls, the people who had just humiliated her laughed, completely unaware that their downfall was minutes away. The announcement cut through the mansion like a blade. A sharp, authoritative voice echoed through the grand hall, silencing laughter mid-note and freezing conversations mid-sentence. "Ladies and gentlemen," Jonathan Caldwell said, standing at the center of the room, "by the explicit instruction of the late Ethan Westfield, there will now be a formal public reading of his last will and testament. All immediate family members, executives, and guests listed in the estate documents are required to remain present." The air shifted. Phones paused. Smiles stiffened. A ripple of tension spread through the room as people instinctively moved closer, sensing that something significant, something dangerous was about to happen. At the front row, Marcus Reed leaned back in his chair, irritation written plainly across his face. Sienna Brooks sat pressed against him, her manicured hand resting possessively on his thigh, as if to remind the room who she was now. She scanned the crowd with thinly veiled triumph, her lips curled in a confident smile. Diana Reed sat beside them, posture rigid, already calculating outcomes. She had attended enough estate readings to know how these things went. Spouses inherited. Sons-in-law stepped into power. The rest followed obediently. Behind them, Logan Reed whispered something to a friend, smirking. This was a formality. At least that's what they believed. Naomi entered last. She walked slowly down the aisle, her heels quiet against the marble floor. She had washed her face, reapplied minimal makeup, and pulled her hair back into a low, controlled style. The delicate gold chain around her neck rested visibly now, no longer hidden. Her eyes were different, still grieving but focused, still wounded but unbroken. Marcus glanced over his shoulder, his expression flickering with annoyance when he saw her take a seat in the back row instead of beside him. Typical, he thought. always dramatic. Caldwell waited until the doors closed. "Before I proceed with the legal documents," he said, "Mr. Westfield requested that a recorded message be played." Murmurs rippled through the room. Marcus straightened. Diana leaned forward. Sienna's smile faltered slightly. "A video?" Diana whispered. "Why would he—" The lights dimmed. The massive screen behind Caldwell flickered to life. And suddenly, Ethan Westfield was in the room. He appeared seated in his study, thinner than most remembered, his face marked by illness. But his eyes were sharp, unyielding, alive with purpose. "If you're watching this," Ethan said calmly, "then I'm gone. And that's all right." The room went silent. Phones lowered. Breaths held. "I lived a full life," Ethan continued. "I built something from nothing. I failed, I learned. I worked until my hands bled, and I would do it all again for one reason only. My daughter." Naomi's throat tightened. "For decades," Ethan said, "I watched people smile at me while waiting for me to die. I watched them flatter my family while planning how to take what I built." Gasps whispered through the crowd. "I also watched my son-in-law," Ethan went on, his voice hardening, "a man who married my daughter not for love, but for proximity to power." Marcus sat up abruptly. "This is inappropriate," he snapped. "Turn it off." Caldwell didn't move. The video continued. "I know about the affair," Ethan said plainly. "I know about Sienna Brooks." Sienna's face drained of color. "I know about the hotel rooms," Ethan continued. "The emails, the lies, the money you stole from my company to fund your betrayal." Marcus stood. "This is a lie." "It is not," Ethan replied coldly. "I have proof." The screen shifted. Photos appeared. Emails, transaction records, dates, times, locations. Every lie laid bare. Sienna covered her mouth, shaking her head. Diana's champagne glass slipped from her hand and shattered on the floor. "And I know about your family," Ethan said. "The jokes you told behind Naomi's back. The plans you made. The way you treated my daughter like an obstacle instead of a human being." The room was frozen. No laughter. No whispers. Just truth, sharp and merciless. "So now," Ethan said, leaning closer to the camera, "we get to the will." Caldwell stepped forward, holding the leather folder. "I, Ethan Westfield, being of sound mind," Ethan continued, "leave 100% of my estate to my daughter, Naomi Westfield." The hall exploded. Shouts, cries, confusion. Marcus spun toward Naomi. "What?" "All shares," Ethan continued over the chaos. "All properties, all accounts, all authority, the company, this estate, everything." Caldwell raised his voice. "Silence." The video resumed. "To Marcus Reed," Ethan said, his tone ice cold, "I leave nothing. You signed an ironclad prenuptial agreement. You have no claim to my daughter's inheritance. Zero." Marcus's face turned crimson. "To Diana Reed and Logan Reed," Ethan continued, "you received nothing. Your employment contracts are subject to Naomi's discretion. Based on your behavior, I doubt they will last." Diana screamed, "This isn't fair." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Neither was what you did to my daughter." The screen went black. For 5 long seconds, no one spoke. Then Naomi stood. She walked forward slowly, each step deliberate, commanding attention without raising her voice. "This mansion," she said calmly, "is mine." Silence. "The company you work for," she continued, looking directly at Marcus's family, "is mine." She turned to Sienna. "You are fired, effective immediately." 2 security guards stepped forward. Sienna stammered, "Naomi, please, escort her out." She turned back to Marcus. "And you," Naomi said quietly, "are no longer my husband." Marcus grabbed her arm. "You can't do this." She pulled away effortlessly. Caldwell stepped forward. "Mr. Reed, federal authorities are waiting outside." The doors opened. Agents entered. Marcus's face collapsed. "You're under arrest for fraud and embezzlement." Handcuffs clicked. Cameras surged again. Naomi didn't flinch. The woman they had mocked was gone. In her place stood something far more dangerous. The rightful heir, and this was only the beginning. 1 year changed everything. Not in loud, cinematic bursts the way gossip sites love to frame it, but in quiet decisions made behind closed doors, in long nights spent studying balance sheets, in early mornings where discipline replaced grief. By the time the world caught up, Naomi Westfield was no longer becoming powerful. She already was. The headlines had burned hot for weeks after the arrest. Billionaire heir exposes cheating husband at father's funeral. Hotel empire heiress takes control. Husband led away in handcuffs. From widow to CEO, Naomi Westfield's rise. Then the news cycle moved on. Naomi did not. The first weeks after the will reading were brutal. Lawyers, auditors, board members, crisis teams, emergency meetings across 3 time zones. The company her father had built with exhaustion and willpower had been stable under his leadership, but now it needed to survive scrutiny. Investors wanted reassurance. Employees wanted certainty. Rivals smelled blood. Many expected her to stumble. They were wrong. Naomi arrived at Westfield International Hospitality headquarters every morning before sunrise. The building rose 50 floors into the Atlanta skyline, glass and steel reflecting a city that never waited for the weak. Her father's name was engraved above the entrance, a reminder and a responsibility. She walked through the lobby without entourage, greeting security guards by name, stopping to ask front desk staff about their families. It wasn't performance, it was memory. She remembered what it meant to be invisible. She refused to let anyone in her company feel that way. Inside the executive offices, skepticism had been thick at first. A grieving daughter. No formal CEO title before. A woman stepping into a multi-billion-dollar empire overnight. The board watched closely, so did Naomi. She listened more than she spoke. She reviewed every department, every property, every contract. She learned who stayed late because they cared, and who stayed late because they were afraid. She replaced fear with clarity. She rewarded competence. She removed dead weight without apology. Within 6 months, Westfield International expanded into 12 new markets. Sustainable luxury initiatives rolled out across resorts in California, Arizona, Florida, and Hawaii. Employee retention hit record highs. Profit margins climbed without layoffs. The same analysts who had doubted her now quoted her in industry reports. Forbes called her a case study in quiet authority. Fortune named her one of the most decisive hospitality leaders of the decade. Naomi never framed those covers. She framed something else. A handwritten note in her father's study, mounted behind glass. Quiet strength is real strength. While her empire grew, the world she left behind collapsed exactly as her father had predicted. Marcus Reed was convicted within 8 months. The evidence was overwhelming, financial trails too clean to dispute, emails too careless to deny. His defense collapsed under its own arrogance. The judge showed no mercy. 15 years. The man who once strutted through a funeral reception in borrowed confidence now lived in a concrete cell, stripped of status, stripped of audience. Naomi never visited. She never wrote. When reporters asked if she felt satisfaction, she answered simply, "I feel free." Diana Reed lost everything within weeks of Marcus's arrest. Without company housing, without her salary, without access to the social circles she'd built on Naomi's father's name, she faded fast. Friends stopped returning calls. Invitations dried up. The woman who once mocked grief now avoided mirrors. Logan Reed tried to reinvent himself, startup pitches, vague, consulting roles, promises built on nothing. Every attempt collapsed. Without Westfield money, his confidence evaporated. As for Sienna Brooks, she disappeared from public view. Naomi heard rumors, marriages of convenience, failed ventures, sudden religious awakenings. None of it mattered. Karma didn't rush. It didn't need to. Exactly 1 year after Ethan Westfield's burial, Naomi stood alone at his grave. The cemetery was quiet, framed by tall trees and filtered sunlight. She wore a simple navy dress, no cameras, no security detail. Just her and the man who had shaped her life. She placed white roses at the headstone and knelt, smoothing the grass with her hands. "Hi, Dad," she whispered. "It's been a year." The words still hurt. They always would. "I did what you asked," she continued softly. "I stopped letting people make me small. The company's strong, stronger than ever. We expanded into Asia last quarter. You would have loved the numbers." Her voice wavered, but she smiled. "I still hear you. Every day. especially when decisions get hard. She reached for the thin gold chain around her neck and opened the locket. Inside was the photo she'd known her whole life herself at 8 years old, sitting on her father's shoulders, both of them smiling like the world hadn't figured out how to hurt them yet. Behind it was the folded note she'd found months earlier. When they try to break you, remember, you were built to build empires. Naomi pressed the locket to her chest and let the tears come. Not the desperate tears of loss, the steady ones of gratitude. I promise I'll keep going, she said. Not for revenge, not for power, but for what you taught me. She stood, brushed the grass from her dress, and took one last look. Then she walked away. Back in the city, her life waited. Her office overlooked downtown Atlanta, sunlight reflecting off neighboring towers. Her assistant handed her a tablet filled with updates, board meetings, expansion proposals, policy reforms. One message stood out, another letter from Marcus's lawyer. Naomi didn't open it. Shred it, she said calmly. She turned to the window, watching the city move beneath her. Cars rushed, people hurried. Somewhere out there were women standing in rooms where they were underestimated, dismissed, humiliated. She hoped they'd hear her story, not as revenge, as proof. Naomi Westfield had lost her father. She had lost her marriage. She had lost the version of herself that once believed silence meant weakness. What she gained was unbreakable, and that was something no one could ever take from her again. If you love true-style stories about betrayal, karma, and quiet revenge, subscribe now. New powerful stories every week, and comment below, where are you watching from?